All right, well, let me see here. Let me click this button and then this button. Oh, and any moment now it should be popping up on screen. We're playing some Deep Rock Galactic today.
For rock and stone!
And I'm here with American Krogan. How's it going, Krogan?
It is going. Okay, I was looking for you. I didn't see you back there.
I was in my room, you know, listening to Evanescence, admiring my posters. Is there a perk here? Oh, look at that. Oh, rival presence. So, how's it going for real? Ando, Spencer, Johnny 5K is on D Live as he always is. Good to see you, Johnny. Spencer had a pretty crazy morning today. What did you do? But, I'm here with American Krogan. We might be able to talk about some things and also check out the new update, right? So, obviously, we're now in Season 2, the Rival Escalation, season.
Lovely.
Next reward.
Yeah, I'm excited to see all the updates. I haven't played this in... really since I stopped streaming regularly with you. So, I mean, I have no idea what all the new changes are. I haven't had any time to look at them at all. So I'm kind of hoping I'll learn a good bit here.
Yeah, well, they got...
yeah.
Well, when we played, were we already in Season 1? Have you played with the new main guns on all these guys?
I don't think so. I don't
Okay.
even think I was playing when there was a technical season.
Okay. So, in
so there's a bunch
Season
of new
1,
guns?
they added new primary weapons for each class. And in Season 2 now, they've added new secondary weapons for each class. So there's 3 weapons for each class.
I'm only seeing 2. Like, I'm looking in, I think, I have a scout, and I'm looking in the arsenal here,
Mm-hmm.
and I see a deep core GK2 for the primary and a M1 000 classic.
Yeah, and so you'll have to
But
come
it's
over
just-
here to the assignment board.
Ah,
So there's an assignment for each new license upgrade. So you're probably going to see a bunch of them in there.
okay, active assignment, special. Hurricane guided rocket system. So I can get like a missile launcher? Wow.
Yeah, that's a new primary for the gunner.
Ah, okay.
And then the secondary for the gunner is the Arms Corps coil gun. It's a coil gun, like a Gauss rifle, only it's a pistol. Gauss pistol.
So how do I determine, it's been a while, how do I determine which assignment, like, obviously if I'm going to be playing this with any kind of regularity, I'm going to want to upgrade the scout I'm thinking right now. So how do I determine which upgraded weapons here are for which classes?
I think there's no way to see it on what you're looking at.
No.
I can tell you, though. So...
So I see a license upgrade for a Drake 25 plasma carbine. That sounds like it would be for the scout.
It is.
Okay, I'm gonna go for that then. If is that cool? Like, can
Yeah,
we
go for it.
work toward that, or
You have to drop your current assignment, though, if you have one. So you can pick that one up.
Active assignment. How do I drop that?
Oh
boy.
Abort assignment on the right side.
I don't see that. Prerequisites weekly. Okay. Active assignment. Objective breach.
Okay, so you might not be able to abort your assignment then. In which case,
Yeah,
you
I
have
don't
to
see that
finish your
anywhere.
assignment before you can abort it.
Angry gamer.
Your mission is ready. The pod is prepped. Get on board the drop pod.
Rounds of skull crushers for
Spencer
Lady
said,
Mike.
or sorry, for real says, is it me or does Krogan sound different? He sounds the same to me.
I haven't changed anything really with my. Well, I mean, I adjusted a few settings on the.
Could you please hurry up?
Oh no! I need to get in the. I need to get in. Oh no!
Get in. I'm ready.
For real says he sounds younger to me.
Huh?
Maybe you're more well rested. How'd you sleep last night, Krogan?
All right. I guess I've been exercising more, but
Oh, there you go.
yeah, there you go.
Now you're younger.
Now I'm younger.
That's good. Sounds like Spencer went on a wild goose chase for medication. So, let me take a look here. Ooh.
All right, team, you're going after eggs this time. Alien eggs.
My favorite mission
Can't miss
type,
them. They're big
eggs.
and they glow. Get the eggs to Sturm
Well,
and Molly.
this one's
and
already
get back
open.
alive. An extra miner has been assigned to your team.
Oh, we got a teammate. Where are they? Oh,
Oh.
I see him.
By the way, so I didn't bring the missile launcher, but here's the coil gun.
Feeling about this.
You sort of charge it up,
Okay.
I ain't gonna tell you.
you slam it through.
Oh, wow.
It leaves this little trail, and it penetrates mobs infinitely, right? So it'll go through as many as are in a line.
Wow.
Zip line ready.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool. And it's like, you know how, uh-oh. Ooh. You know how, oppressors are, where they have the big, sort of steel armored face, right? You can shoot this in their face, and it actually does full damage. You don't actually have to get behind them, because it penetrates infinitely, right? So, it's the only thing that you can actually really damage oppressors with to the face.
Has the performance for the game improved since I've been playing? Because it seems like I have a pretty good rig, but I feel like I wasn't getting like consistently like 144 hertz or 144 frames per second before, and now it seems like I'm getting that pretty solidly.
I haven't noticed any sort of difference, but it may have.
Yeah, I mean, I can usually tell if something, like, I'm totally spoiled at this point, and I can tell if something is above 60. I can totally tell if it drops below 60. I mean, most of us can, but I can't really tell a difference. When it gets above 80, I can't really tell a difference. I'm just looking at the, okay, I see it dropped to 120 here and there, but yeah, I don't know if you're the same way. Like, you know, it's hard to discern a difference above 80. Like, I can see the difference between 80 and 60 FPS, but really above 80, I can't tell most of the time.
I mean, I can definitely feel some frame drops in games and tell when things are lower or higher, but I don't actually look at frames. Like, I don't look at an actual monitor of frame rate enough to actually know what my feeling translates to in real frames. Krogan, can you jump and get these eggs off the wall?
Okay, where is that? Where are you pointing?
This thing here.
Egg here.
Okay, all right,
Wonder what
all right,
Deep
all
Rock
right.
is using them for.
Lights up.
I need the damn
Gonna get over there
Where is
first,
it?
though, so I can get a better angle. So, is there a platform there I'm gonna land on, or am I gonna like?
I
Just
think you can
fall?
just get in a little cubby there, can't you? Yeah, and then dig in. So, Rasmus says, have any opinions on the whole Nick Fuentes situation? I'm not up to date on the whole Nick Fuentes situation. I've heard people talk about, like, there's some drama with him, but I'm just so uninterested in drama, and I'm so much more interested in ideas than people, right? So, like, you know.
I'm not like up to date on what the current thing is, but
Molly carries
yeah, I'm not gonna speculate and say anything. Yeah, I'm not gonna.
life in a nutshell.
Otto Rocks just followed on D-Live. How's it going, Otto? So if
Am I digging
anyone's got
into
a
the right-
anyone's got a quick TLDR on the Nick Fuentes situation, I can at least reply to that.
Pesticide coming up.
Get back. It's sandwiched.
Uh-oh.
Kill it before somebody gets
The Praetorian's on you up there.
I'm getting. Ah! Oh, I'm gonna go down.
Don't do that.
Whoop. I got away. Got 2 on me.
Yep.
It just jammed.
Otto
right.
says TLDR on what situation? Someone was asking me. I'm also on YouTube. Someone was asking me about Nick Fuentes, and I don't know what his deal is. I don't know what has happened, what has transpired recently in the world of Fuentes. So
Fire in the hole!
I would need a TLDR before any sort of comment. Pontic says Fuentes is a troll.
That's, you know, that's the kind of behavior I've just seen him engage in. It's just more about drama now. It's far less about the ideas. It's just like, let's engage in sort of Jerry Springer type behavior. What is entertaining to people in that regard, and I'm kind of like sick of that. All right, so I need the thing, Molly, little bot. So I called Molly down to where I'm at so I can deposit the egg. I don't think I'm gonna be able. Well, I could probably carry it up through here, but she's already coming down. So. Oh boy.
Alright, so someone's giving me something on that. So Rasmus says, former friend of Nick's, Jaden McNeil, went on a stream last night to say Nick is a grifter who cares more about his ego than actually making changes. Well, I mean, there's a few points to that. I mean, like, is anyone going to see the type of success that Nick has seen without some of an ego? Like, do you understand what I'm asking? Like, when it comes to someone going out there, putting their face on a movement, you know, right? Like, you gotta have some of an ego most of the time, you know what I mean? Like, the person who puts his face on a movement is not, like, it's like, on some level, somewhat you might need that to some degree.
I know what you're saying.
But it's like, if the goal is to, like, find the guy who will put his face on a movement but have no ego at the same time, it's like, you're looking for an unmarried bachelor to some degree. Or, yeah, a married bachelor. And I'd have to hear the specific criticisms, because, like, what sort of changes do we believe is in his power to make that he's not making?
Smooth.
Like, I'm not here saying Nick Fuentes is some great guy or isn't some great guy or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, what exactly is in his power to change that he's not changing exactly? Okay, we need 3 eggs here.
Yeah, you know, I don't know if this is a criticism of Nick or just, like, the current cultural paradigm and how it tends to make people his age and younger into sort of nihilistic. You know, it just promotes, I think the overall culture just promotes nihilism and just sort of unserious behaviors to a certain extent, and I just think that maybe that's something that affects far more people than him. So, like, when you criticize him for that, you might not actually be criticizing him per se, and really, like, the overall paradigm of what's happening.
Come here.
So, what do you mean by nihilism in this case?
Just low-hanging fruit drama, like, you know,
Much better.
I think a lot of people just want sort of, like, they don't really care about ideas to a certain extent. They just kind of want entertainment, you know? And drama and Jerry Springer stuff is entertaining. And then, you know, if you attach some, you know, superficially meaningful ideas to that, it kind of makes the drama even better. But really the nugget, the real important part to people, what they prioritize is the entertainment, it is the drama, it's not the ideological goal, it's not the ethnic or racial goal, it's really just the drama.
Yeah, so on some level, you would go to like you see it, like you go to the left-wing sphere, and your average sort of left-wing sphere person is to a large degree someone who's just involved in the drama in the communists, and the right-wing sphere person is the person who follows all the drama in the nationalists, right? Like, to your average person who doesn't make content or doesn't do any of this stuff, doesn't like advocate any serious change, doesn't care about the ideas, it's like, which group's drama are they following? Yeah, which team?
Yeah, like, you know, people pick these teams and they root for them, and ultimately I don't know if people are so serious at this point that, like, you know, they don't still view these quote-unquote teams as things that they can just swap out if they feel like it, if one's more entertaining than the other.
Okay, let me take a look.
There's a lot of things going on, and so you know, it's not really that easy to diagnose what is going on in a particular situation, because there's like more than one factor at play.
So Ando says a bunch of Fuentes' people are leaving his circle and claiming he's a narcissistic sociopath or something like that.
Good news, team. The wave is thinning out. Stand back. Supply pod inbound.
Let's see here. Spencer says Nick has flagged people who disagrees with him. We did look at that on a stream the other day, and that's not good.
Yeah, I totally disapprove of that, and I'm not gonna make any kind of excuses for that. I think that's very, very juvenile.
Well, and it's like anti-us at the end of the day. Like, if his goal is to empower sort of this left-wing censorship oligarchy, and he wants to align himself with that and makes friends with that and use that as his tool, then, like, he's anti-us, right?
Yeah.
Let's see here. Pontic says he also hangs out with that weirdo Catboy Cammy or whatever, the Australian.
Yeah.
Do they actually hang out?
I don't know if they do anymore. I mean, I just don't know.
Yeah.
I know that they did hang out a whole lot for a while, but I don't know if they still do.
Pro tip, hotshot. We're here to shoot the ones without beards.
So you might hear there, Krogan, that there are new voice lines in the game as well.
For rock and stone.
We are unbreakable.
All right, so I guess we need to do something with this little battery over here.
Explosives flying.
No, that's the drillers before he disconnected.
Oh. Ah. Oh, I guess we weren't good enough.
Sweet.
Rasmus
Alright,
says Nick pretends as though he's making changes in the real world when he's using that money for other things. He also lied about having $500,000 stolen, and he recently started doxing others.
There is yeah, you know, there are legitimately people who grift, and I mean it's kind of always amazing to me how much money a particular individual will get a hold of with, you know, because of politics, and then they kind of don't do anything with the politics. Like, they kind of just boast about how much money they have to other people in a drama sphere. Like it just becomes this talking point where like, look how much money I have. I'm so much better than so and so because you know they're trying to dunk on me, but I got all this money. And it's
yeah, you do see that in the streams. You know, like there'll be some sort of conflict between two people, and they'll be like, well, look, I got all these viewers, I'm getting all these big stream donations, you know, clearly this other person is wrong.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I can't stand that. Yeah. You know, I mean, how much... Yeah, boy. Okay.
Come here.
I mean, if it comes down to any sort of, I'll say this, it's like, you know, I'm more or less about forgiveness. I believe in forgiving people, giving people a second chance, that sort of stuff. But, you know, there are certain things, like, in what I would think of as the political movement that I care about. I'll tell you what, we won't ever have to, we'll never be so desperate for people that certain types of people have to be allowed in what I consider to be our movement.
Yeah.
Thieves, rapists, child molesters, anything like that, you know, I've got no interest in as people, so, like, some of our guys, I'm sorry to tell you or whatever, like, they'll be like, oh, how about this guy? And not only does he have bad optics in terms of, like, the general sphere, but I don't want to talk about this too much, but people will be like, well, what do you think of Mr. Duke, who I know has had a gambling addiction and has stolen a lot of money from people who care about white people, right? He's stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from working class white people for his gambling addiction or whatever. So at this point, as smart as you might think he is, or as good as you might think he is, I have no reason. I don't believe in elevating his name into, you know, the higher ranks. Like, when people say his name in the same sentence as, Jared Taylor, like, I'm not happy about that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's just kind of, what you always have to remember is that there are, like, dozens of people who have been advocates for our movement for decades and decades, and, like, their names should be elevated. Their names should be, yeah, their names should be elevated, and the fact that, you know, a lot of these sort of newcomers with all these shady things about their past, you know, like, the fact that they're elevated is, you know, probably not a good sign. I mean, you can read into that in a myriad of ways, but yeah, I mean, there's plenty of, like, really good people to promote and elevate, and there's never really a good excuse to elevate somebody who has, like if you're constantly asking, like, what are the pros and cons of such and such person, you know, you're probably getting your answer there. Yeah, there's you know, not many people are debating what are the pros and cons of Jared Taylor. So
Yeah. So, Mr. Gladius says, don't want to be controversial, but isn't a pejorative of the one with rulers, the strong, or in general those with a modicum of power, to not allow others to criticize them? You're gonna have to rephrase that.
yeah, that's a little
Otto says he boasts about how little he has. The love of money is the root of all evil. That is the correct saying, actually. You'll hear a lot of people say something like, money's the root of all evil, but in reality, the correct saying is the love of money is the root of all evil. Otto is one of the few people who I've ever seen actually get that one right.
Well, I mean, here's the thing about money. You know, you have to be sort of contextual about it because, you know, at this point, what our movement does need is it does need a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But it needs money to go into the hands of the right people who aren't going to be sort of nihilistic or selfish or narcissistic grifters. It needs to go into the hands of people who are going to take a very minimal amount of it for themselves and use like the overwhelming majority of it to build organizations, to build networks, to
Well, they can't
build up
love
infrastructure.
it, right? They can't love the money. They have to use the money. They have to view the money as a tool and
as
like,
a means. Yeah.
like, how do I take this amount that I have and turn it into the most amount of good for our people, sort of deal.
Right. And those people are, you know, unfortunately, I think the whole system we live in, the whole paradigm we live in, doesn't easily select for those people.
Right.
The whole paradigm we live in,
They're not sexy and fun and dramatic, right? They don't have a lot of interesting, like, juicy morsels of drama that come out of them. You know, like, what's the latest drama between Jared Taylor and a Catboy? There isn't one, right? There's no drama. There's no, like, Jared Taylor Catboy crossovers.
Right.
Ando says he donated some money to Amren earlier this year. He feels like they're one of the only reliable groups, or one of the only groups that are truly reliable and consistent. I agree.
I agree.
One second here. I got a smell happening here. I want to make sure I didn't leave the stove on or something. I'll be right back.
All right. So, I will just sit here and entertain the audience with spastic Jerry Springer drama. So, who can I talk some trash about? Gee. I don't have the chat window open either. Sorry, guys. So I can't read anything anybody's saying.
All right. Well, no, I'm good.
Oh, he's back. All right.
There's nothing burning down here. Well, Spencer says Jared Taylor's like a friendly old grandpa. I don't know. Uncle Jared in my mind. Uncle Jared. Gladius says what he meant is that anyone with power won't allow others to criticize them. Fuentes is like a little ruler. Might makes right. And as such, we all get censored. Right. Yeah. Well, I mean...
there is, you know, Academic Agent has talked about this and, like, variations of it. I don't think he's specifically talked about this particular instance of it, but, like, he's talked about, you know, rules of power acquisition and what generally tends to happen when an individual or a group acquires power and so on and so forth. And, yeah, there are, like, there are consistent phenomena that take place once an individual or a group acquires power, and you know, you're probably going to see that you know, if we were able to acquire power, can we honestly say that we wouldn't like censor people with nefarious ideas, you know, nefarious anti-white ideas? You know, I probably would. And I know a lot of people would probably give me a lot of flack for saying that and admitting that, or, you know, but, you know, when it comes down to it, if there's a particular faction of people who are on the up and up and they are threatening, you know, the well-being of you and your people and your kinsmen and so on and so forth, if, you know, you can... because it's not like people always respond to rational argumentation. You can be logically and rationally and argumentatively sound and absolutely correct about a series of topics, but if your enemies engage in some kind of emotional ploy, that can hijack a lot of your people's mindsets. And it can make them make very poor decisions in the... I'm babbling, so if you want to jump in, go ahead.
Well, I mean, some amount of censorship is inevitable. We just, like... There's very few people in the world who really believe there should be no censorship. I think, you know, at the end of the day, I'm probably one of those people who pushes... Wait here. I should be on driller or something, or maybe engineer.
Well, I mean, you make a good point. You know, I don't think, and I think more people need to be honest about this. I don't think anybody is a free speech absolutist. I mean, even Elon Musk has, if you take him all at complete face value, he even has even said on Twitter that he thinks that, you know, the 10% of the most extreme left should be unhappy with everything, and so should the most extreme 10% of the right. And that does reveal that he's not actually a free speech absolutist in the most absolute sense. And I don't think anybody is. Like, you know, most of the very conservative Christian right-wing segment of society, they don't want groomers to be able to say things that verbally reinforce grooming behaviors.
Feel like we're digging our own grave.
Mistaken for a human.
And I think Jonathan Greenblatt actually said something potentially informative here. He said something along the lines of, and I forget where he said that. It was on a mainstream news network, but he basically said he doesn't want to entirely cut off the speech of the far right, but he wants to ensure that they're fringe. It's like, so he thinks it's okay that they can say what they want to say, but they need to be seen as fringe. They need to be reduced to the fringes of society, so on and so forth. And that, I think, is legitimately somewhat representative of how a lot of people think about free speech in pragmatic terms. Like,
Yeah.
they don't want speech to coalesce into a normative outcome. You know, speech they disagree with. They don't want, like, things they disagree with to become a norm. So you can say whatever you want as long as it doesn't acquire power or become a norm. That's how most people think about it.
So,
And,
like, the whole
you know,
point of saying the things has to be neutered, and then you get to say it.
Right. I do think that, I don't think that's unique to Greenblatt or his tribe.
No.
I think that's how a lot of people think about free
Right.
speech. You get to say whatever you want. And the problem
Well,
is
and
that
that's how just take your average sort of person who's like a big fan of liberalism. You know, if someone who would announce that they are that they're an appreciator of liberalism and believes that, like, the sort of Western liberal tradition must succeed under all circumstances. What they'll say is, like, hey, everyone should be able to speak as long as we all get to have our little debate, the far right, the far left, and then, you know...
Western liberalism wins out.
And then everyone loses except for the liberals, right?
Right.
So, I don't know if you can hear that, Krogan. You can hear some dwarves calling for help.
Oh, wow.
Listen for
We gotta
it.
save him.
Do you hear it?
I do.
Do you notice how it's slightly metallic sounding?
Oh, they're not really dwarves.
No. They are an evil robot because the mining corporation we're fighting against is completely automated. It is only robots. And this is a robot designed to call for help for us, so we'll go to it out of our, like, human or dwarven compassion, and then it attacks us.
Boy, does that tie into a lot of things.
There it is.
I really like the guys who made this game.
I made a platform. Keep your distance. The Nemesis is lethal up close.
It is lethal up close.
But yeah, you know, and I think a lot of, you know, Northwest European derived Americans, and just European Americans in general, I think they have this, hold on. Ah, boy.
So, Johnny
Have to take
5K
care of
says
these.
he'd ban Antifa. Uh-oh. Here it comes. And definitely, it gets very lethal up close. Very lethal up close.
Hey, I'm not the enemy. Die, quick.
So we gotta get this thing out
boy.
of here.
Needs assembly.
It's still doing that fake call for help.
It's armed and ready.
So obviously the big red shields are shields, right? So you can't shoot for them, through them. No, shoot whenever that's not in the way. It'll grab you and, like, throw you or crush you.
Wow, this guy's really a bullet sponge.
Plasma deployed.
Yep.
Oh, wow. I did not know he would do that.
I told you.
Well, I figured I could run away.
Armed and ready.
I figured I could run past him.
Nope.
And, like, maybe, like... Oh, boy. I screwed that up.
Platform.
Sorry.
All right, let's see.
Gotta wait for the recharge.
Once he comes
But yeah,
through.
I mean, the whole Western liberal democratic, you know, free speech tradition, like a lot of people who adhere to it don't realize that, you know, most other people in the world don't operate at that, they don't operate with that mindset, and they will basically, I mean, what we've seen with Twitter and social media and just all the power apparatuses of the United States is that other people come in, they use free speech as a ladder to gain and acquire power, and then they dismantle free speech and everything behind them. That's just typically how most people operate. And while I do think that most Northwest Europeans and, you know, Anglo-Saxons and Germanics and all of that do have this disproportionate tendency to support, you know, absolute free speech, I still think that even they don't support absolute free speech, but they support it more so than a lot of other groups do, and they will support it to the extent that they will allow other groups to acquire power and say things and do things that run counter to their own group interests. Because they're just basically what we're talking about is just disproportionate tolerance. Tolerance is not universally distributed.
Right.
And we can clearly see that with Sweden. The Swedes are an extremely tolerant people, and they have allowed a very, very intolerant people to come into their society. And we see, you know, like these mass riots over, you know, the burning of the Quran. And while I wouldn't necessarily ever feel the desire to burn the Quran to spite somebody, what I can say is that, oh boy, I shouldn't have done that. Boy, okay. You know, you just don't see Americans or Swedes or anybody flipping out over their statues and their heritage and their things that are material but identify with their heritage or symbolize their heritage. You don't see any of us flipping out the way that Muslims do over, you know, the burning of or the defamation or the desecration of their symbols.
Yeah.
You just do not see that. And
well, and we're more harsh on each other when that happens, right? Like if a Christian were to freak out about a burned Bible and, you know, bomb something, your average sort of white Westerner would say that they're really bad for having done that. That's a terrible thing.
Yeah.
You should never do that. But when a Muslim freaks out about, let's say, Quran being mistreated, that same white person will be like, well, you know, you were intolerant, so they bombed you, and they'll sort of make excuses for that behavior. So
right,
that Nemesis we killed was supposed to have a data core in it, but I can't find it, so I guess we're moving on.
All right. Yeah, and I talked about all this in the recent Call of Duty UK race riots video, you know, when I talked about, you know, what Charles Wooten and some of these other guys did when they fled to the lodging house in Upper Pitt Street. I mean, they had fired on police, they had attacked police with razors, they had harmed people, and, you know, the general sense or sentiment you get from the British public when they kind of hear about all that, you know, the idea that local Brits would form a crowd, form a mob, and I need to find where you are at. Oh boy, I am lost.
You're back in the first room.
Yeah, I know.
So you can hold tab to open the map or whatever.
All right. Oh, you went that way. All right.
Well, there's only one way to go out of the first room.
Yeah, so basically, you know, a sort of white mob formed. It didn't treat Wooten very well, and the general sense you get from the public is like, oh man, white people should have exercised a great deal of tolerance, and yet, you know, white people, those same white people, when somebody calls a black person a bad name, anything that comes afterwards, they'll just view that as, well, that's what you get.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you get. That was just, you know, and it really does kind of reveal that in aggregate, people do have different expectations in terms of tolerance.
Yeah.
And impulse control from different people.
Right.
And that's very interesting.
So let's see here in chat. You have Pontic says it's a complex matter.
Grabbing ammo.
Altruism is good when it comes to in-group preferences, and also a danger of manipulation is always present. Right. Well, I mean, our people need to have a little bit more salience about the in-group and the out-group if we're gonna, I don't know, succeed in any sort of way. So why don't you come and take this thing here, repair that, and then this one.
Out, lads. This needs fixing.
You repair that. Can you repair it? Okay, there you go. And then you can grab the thing out of it. Pontic says that people don't want freedom. And to some extent, I'd agree with that. Like, in America especially, like, freedom is sort of synonymous with good things, right? Freedom is synonymous with all the opportunity and a good life and this and that and the other thing. But, people... When it comes to revealed preferences, it seems to me that they don't want freedom. What they want is economic opportunity and prosperity and security, right? They want these sorts of things when it comes to, like, what do they actually move away from and move towards, you know? They don't necessarily move towards the areas where they always get the most freedom. They frequently move to the areas that are just going to be, like, most economically beneficial to themselves. This is what I talked about a little bit in my video. Assimilation is a joke. One second here. Did I mute myself here?
Gotta check my terrain.
No, I can hear you.
All right.
Oh boy, we got slick ice here. That's cool.
Yeah, the black ice. That's super slippery.
Platforms placed. What? The time is not great.
So, Pontic says the very same people will call themselves humanists and human rights activists. Yeah, I mean, humanist is an emotional term. I mean, it mostly has to do with being able to call people who disagree with you anti-human, right? That's why you call yourself a humanist, for, like, politically moralizable reasons.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's this whole idea that it's like, you know, oh, if you're a white racialist, or if you're a racialist, then you don't think other groups outside of your group are human, and it's just like,
yeah.
That's one thing that plays into it, and I just think that's ridiculous. It's like, you have to literally believe that everybody's exactly the same and interchangeable, otherwise you're inhuman.
Yeah.
It's just like, no. Yeah, I particularly can't stand that, and you know, just a lot of people use that to, you know, delegitimize everything that you're saying and paint you out to be this horrible monster, and that's really one of the things that gets me most upset and depressed about, you know, the kind of activism that you and I engage in. It's just, how some people will literally view you as this, you know, anti-human monster, and you know, some nights that's just real depressing to think that people think of you that way.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I think politics is more or less morality, especially among whites.
Mule is functional again.
Otto, in terms of you saying assimilation isn't a joke, I would, if you're interested, I would check out my video that I made on it. Part of the reason I phrased it that way is because I'm trying to make the point in that video that how people think assimilation has happened and what has actually happened are two different things. So, for example, when you look at the United States, people will say, like, well, you know, you have all these different cultures from around Europe coming into the United States, and it becomes one of the most prosperous places in the world. And they'll say, like, they will paint a story that basically suggests that these different peoples from around Europe decided to sort of put their differences aside and to act as one. But in reality, what is... when we look at historic European immigration into the United States, there's a lot of re-immigration. And there was a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment. And it seems to me, statistically, when you look at the available data, what is more likely taken place is that people who didn't fit in were told that they should go back home. Over something around 40% or 33%, about a third or more of Europeans who came to the United States ultimately went back home. They didn't fit in. Meanwhile, about, like, when you go down to Southern Europe, right, think of the United States being mostly founded by Northern Europeans, that sort of Northern European Protestant tradition. Like, half of all Italians who came to the United States, over half, went back to Italy. They simply didn't really fit in that well. So, like, if you're an American with Italian blood, that's likely because you're from the part of the Italian immigrant group that actually kind of found that you fit in here pretty well and liked it and enjoyed your time here. You're part of that family group, right? So the idea that I'm proposing is basically that people don't simply go to a different area and choose...
Abandon their entire past.
You don't choose to value what you value. You don't choose to feel and believe what you believe. You believe things because you believe them, not because you choose to believe them, right? And so if the area you're moving to disagrees with you, you might end up being unhappy there unless you move back. Similarly, if you find that it does agree with you, you can just sort of settle in and feel good, right? But in that video, I talk about some of the available statistics on the matter. So, you know, if you want to watch that video, you might find some of the statistics and information somewhat convincing, right? So, I'm fine with, like, the only reason I say assimilation is a joke ultimately is because what has actually taken place is not what people imagine. They imagine that, like, two different groups would just decide to stop valuing the stuff they valued, and I don't think that's, like, I don't think that's how things work.
So are we, what are we doing here? Are we,
Well, I mean, there's all
finishing
sorts of
this up?
Nitra and Bulu caps on the wall that you can get. We have 4 Bulu caps. I have 2 now. I put a platform under one, otherwise they glow. And then we can start the end of this mission. Gladius says, a question for Krogan. Oh, One second here. Otto wants to see the video. Let me see if I can bring that up real quick. Whoops. You might hear a quick second.
No matter.
Whoop.
How do I bring in the oh boy.
Okay, question for Krogan, says Mr. Gladius. Have you watched the Killzone 2 videos he sent you?
No, I don't think so. Can you send them again? I must admit, I remember somebody sending me Killzone, something about Killzone, but I misplaced it. I think they said too that like it was only part of it. Yeah, you're gonna have to send me that again. I'm sorry, or yeah. Oh boy, I need to figure out how to oh boy. Okay, how do I deploy the resupply again? I forget.
5.
Oh, that's right. Oh boy. Oh boy.
Plasma buster!
Hang in there. Supplies are on the way.
Yeah,
Alright, I have the
Killzone-
caps.
Objective completed. Fine job.
Okay, yeah, Killzone seems like it potentially has a lot of things worth commenting on. I've never really played any of those games like start to finish. I think that's mostly because I didn't have a PlayStation. Like 2 years ago or something like that, maybe 3 years ago. I think I got a PS4 so I could play and review Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm forgetting the year that came out now. But that's really the main reason why I got that. And before that, I hadn't really owned a PlayStation for all that long at any given point, so I never ended up playing those games. But I think I have an emulator. I think I have an emulator that can run all of them. Except for the really new one, I think.
See you later, Otto. Uh-oh. Get out of here. Second Hat says, have any of you guys read Bertrand D. I don't know how to pronounce that. Theory of Highs and Lows of Middle Alliance? I think it explains the behavior of the modern Western elite. I haven't read that. I don't know it.
Sounds like something AA might have covered to one extent or another.
Whack-a-mole!
Well, I suppose I should be building my thing here.
I'm not scared of you! Sentry gun needs assembly!
What did he say there? Die like your mother did?
Yeah.
What is that supposed to reference?
I don't know if it's a reference so much as it is just an insult against your mom, you know?
Yeah.
Access provided.
Pontic says the Killzone guys created Horizon Zero Dawn.
Oh boy. Oh boy, that is not yeah, Horizon Zero Dawn is really bad in terms of like feminist, like it's all about matriarchs. It's just, God, that game has so many things going on in it that are just bizarre. Like, you know, it's supposed to take place in this like distant future where like these like self-replicating robots sort of like destroyed everything and took over, and you know, humanity, like there's all these like tribes going on, and yet all these tribes have like this carefully curated amount of diversity. Like there are just there's no ethnogenesis that occurred in the thousands of years of intermingling that supposedly went on. Like there are all these distinct groups, and it's all women who run everything, despite it being exceedingly tribal and primitive. Like it's just, that game is just crazy. I mean, I often wonder
Fuel cells have arrived.
what
Get them connected to
somebody
the
like, you know, what an
assembly.
average Western man would think of like that narrative. Like, okay, what would an average Western man from the early 20th century think of that game's narrative if you could travel back in time and show it to them? Like, I just wonder what they would say. But yeah, the fact that the Killzone guys made that, I wasn't aware of that. Makes me suspect that there are a lot of weird things going on in the Killzone games.
Mr. Gladius says, it's devastating to see how they have gone to the obvious ethnic conflict in Killzone to the global homo of Horizon.
Yeah, I mean, Horizon Zero Dawn is just over and over again. It is this extremely gynocentric thing. It's all matriarchs that run everything. You play as a female warrior. Like, all the men that you encounter, all the NPCs you encounter, like, they are repeatedly groveling toward your like powerful warrior nature. Like, there are all these like men who need you to go on a quest to do something for them because they can't do it, they're too weak. It's just insane, and I would love to know like what is the demographic distribution of the people who played the game. Like, how many women played that game versus how many men, and what's the age brackets and all of that, because I mean, I feel like that game is just mostly putting terrible ideas in young men's heads.
Yeah. You can say that a lot. You can say that about a lot of the gaming industry.
Oh, you can, but Horizon Zero Dawn is really, when you look at it, it's on another level. It's really bad. It's, you know, like one of the worst instances that I can think of.
One of them gets tree climbing halfwit.
You know, and the other thing is the fact that those games celebrate, you know, everybody being represented in a tribe, and a tribe isn't based on race or ethnicity. It still kind of shows that, like, that nobody really wants ethnogenesis. Mm-hmm. Like, black people want to be represented.
Right.
Asian people want to be represented.
They don't want to have been mixed away centuries ago.
And so it's like, you know, well, I mean, the second white people express that, it's like, oh my God!
Yeah. It's anti-white. Pontic says Horizon Dawn is also very boring.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a bad game. A lot of people think it's a great game, and you know, I want to have Dave Martell on a stream at some point to talk about like what are good game models and what are bad game models. And I feel like the whole open world, you run around everywhere, I feel like that's got to go. I feel like it's a bad game model. It's boring. It monopolizes people's time. I feel like games should be enjoyed more so for like, you know, the model should be more about short bursts. Like, you know, games should be designed to be played for like, you know, a half hour here, an hour there. Like, I don't think games should be designed such that you spend an entire afternoon playing it.
Yeah.
I mean, on a rare occasion, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I mean, I think people our age, remember, you know, that odd summer month in like the late 90s or something like that, where we played a PlayStation game a whole lot. Like, every once in a while, a little binge like that is okay, but when the games are designed in such a way that there's just tons of them that do that, and it's an industry standard, and, you know, you have this whole culture where everybody is, you know, doing that all the time, you know, that's bad. That's bad, and there needs to be a cultural shift. There needs to be an industry shift. You know, I really would like to see more of a resurgence of like retro-inspired shooters and things like that. Games that require a lot of like intense and attention, you know, for like a half hour, an hour, and then you're kind of like, I'm done. And then you feel like you want to come back to it again, you know, in a couple days or something. I feel like that should be more of the model.
You could play Pokemon Unite. That's what I've been playing.
I haven't looked into any of that. I don't know anything about it, so maybe I need to watch a video or something just to orient myself with it.
Well, you know MOBAs like Dota and League of Legends.
Yeah.
Pokemon Unite is a MOBA that's based around a 10-second game. By the way, get in here. Jesus. So it's I'd say 10-minute game. It's a 10-minute MOBA, right? So it's a high attention to focus. It's you and 4 other people, so it's a 5v5 team play environment. Your 5 versus their 5, trying your hardest for 10 minutes, and that's the round, right? You play for you play 3 or 4 games, or 2 to 4 games, like a half hour, and then that's a lot to maintain a high level of intention and trying for a half hour and then being done for a little bit. It's on Switch and phones and tablets, and it's free.
Yeah,
but it's by your favorite company, Tencent.
I've talked about. I'll probably have to hop out of here in a minute. I don't think I could do a full 2 hours today, but I was just gonna say a lot of people in our circles, talk about. I've talked about mobile games and the importance of it. I've never played a whole lot of mobile games, so perhaps I need to examine that a little bit more. But I still feel like mobile games and games that kind of fall into that casual genre are important for propagandistic purposes, or the dissemination, or the purposes of dissemination certain ideas and cultural shifts. When I was on Countercurrents recently, I was talking about the idea of interactive novels for women being important, and just you don't even have to be explicit about a ton of stuff. Just make certain personality archetypes bad and certain personality archetypes good. The bad boy pump and dump guy, you can make a narrative wherein that guy is bad and you can clearly see how he's bad and how he does all these bad things. And the girl can be sort of incentivized to choose the more wholesome guy. There's a whole slew of things you could do.
You could take all of Little House on the Prairie and the Waltons and turn it into interactive novels.
That would, and I think women would naturally just kind of like a lot of that stuff.
Oh yeah, they definitely would. There's a lot of compassion and nice things and cool aesthetics and family love that's talked about in those sorts of things.
Yeah, people need to realize that I think it might actually be the most popular quote unquote traditional. The Sims are that is a sort of a game that's on a traditional gaming platform. Yeah. And I think that of all the traditional gaming platforms where you find women, that is one of the most popular among women. It might even, I think it might actually be above 50% of the player base is women.
Oh yeah, of The Sims? You're playing dolls. It's a dollhouse game.
Right. And if you look at Sims today and you look at what is being promoted, what's not being promoted, what's being incentivized, it's a mess.
Is it?
It's terrible. Now, I haven't spent an inordinate amount of time looking into it. But I've seen some things here and there, and I've talked to some people, and it promotes a lot of bad stuff, and a lot of it's done implicitly. Mm-hmm. And right. So we need people who are pushing, that are making games and pushing things in those games, because the fact of the matter, a lot of this is where you get into the problem of free speech and propaganda, because a lot of people have this idea that, well, if our side did that, that would be propaganda, and it's well, you live in propaganda already. Right. You are saturated in propaganda. Everything you consume is propaganda. Propaganda isn't there's this misconception out there that propaganda is just Nazis or Soviets or something like that. It's just something that an authoritarian dictatorial regime does. Mm-hmm. And anything else is just natural and organic. No. The kinds of things that you're seeing with Sims in the AAA gaming industry is not natural and organic. Activists have come into the industry and they've taken it over, and they push their agendas in every single game. And the games you are consuming and the films you are watching, they are all propaganda. And what we need to do is institute counter propaganda. It's just a fact of life. If you don't, you will lose.
Right.
You will just essentially let all of them dictate the cultural direction of things. And it's just, you don't have to like it, but that's just a fact of reality.
Pontic says, let's make visual novels for our women. I agree. Pontic says, a based version of Life is Strange. I agree. Pontic says, Animal Crossing is also a woman magnet. Yeah, that's true. And something, you know, I've talked about with Krogan before, like, this is part of the reason, like, all these games that do push all these messages, I mean, they are propaganda, right? They push all these messages. Part of the reason that they're working so well is because there's no counter messaging, right? And this is why I talk about, like, homeschooling your kids. One of the things we know about human psychology is the stuff that people believe is basically the same. It's whatever messaging they hear the most frequently, right?
Yeah.
So if you send your kid away to a public school where they're spending like 8 hours a day there, 5 days a week, I mean, so you're going to give them 40 hours a week of brainwashing of the sort of modern propaganda. Like, okay, are you going to spend 50 or 60 or 70 hours with them a week talking that all down?
You don't have that.
You don't have that. That's not going to happen. And there's no amount of like, oh, well, you'll just reason with them. Well, you know, my kids are smart. I'll just reason with me. Well, they might be smart, but they're brainwashed, right? You can't, like, undo a whole week of brainwashing at a public school with your sort of, like, father-daughter talk on Saturday. Like, that's not happening.
If people want a good example of somebody who is highly intelligent and capable, but you nevertheless brainwashed, I would highlight Mary Louise Roberts, that woman I highlighted in the video I did recently. You know, she wrote this book about the Allies going on a rape epidemic or something. You know, and she gets to this point. She wrote this book basically defaming American GIs in World War II who in Allied occupied France, you know, raped a lot. But she gets to this point in the book where she has to recognize that it was really disproportionately black men who were committing these rapes. And so because she was brainwashed from such a young age to believe in like absolute racial egalitarianism, and that when anything bad happens with negatively perceived racial outcomes, then it must be the fault of white racism. She then uses all of her intelligence to come up with these really wacky, disjointed rationales for why that disparity occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you see. I mean, it's just evidence of the fact that like people can be very, very smart and still, because they have this brainwashed, this starting premise that's erroneous.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the starting premise is like the foundation for their entire worldview, but it's wrong. But because it's so drilled into them, they will operate always as if that starting premise is just true, and they will never question it, and they will just interpret all. And, you know, when your kid goes through school, they will get those foundational beliefs instilled in them.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, people just really underestimate how important it is to, I mean, all this stuff is really, really important, and no amount of libertarianism in the sense of like, well, I'll just teach my kid the right values. Like you gotta get rid of that mindset, because, you know, it will be your kids one day. It will be your kids who are brainwashed. Yeah, I don't know. I'm babbling.
Nero says, would you guys include propaganda analysis and deconstruction in the curricula of children and teens?
Maybe teens, not children.
I think I wouldn't allow my kids to consume things freely without that education. Yeah, I mean, so curricula of children and teens, are you talking like in homeschooling? Like if you're homeschooling your kids, yeah, at some point you're going to have to talk about like, listen, here are some of these ideas that they're going to present you with, and here's why, you know, it may have superficial appeal. It's like, we're going to deconstruct this down to like its component parts, and its component parts have to do with like increasing hatred for white people, portraying certain parts of colonial history but not other parts, right? There's like complete disregard for like the vast amounts of paternalism that took place in colonial history. This idea that like, hey, we've cured these diseases, these people haven't, we have to go over there and like start to give them modern systems because they're still experiencing famines like how we used to centuries ago. So we have to go over there and fix their famines, and we have to go over there and cure their disease, and we have to go over there and to be their mom and dad on some level, societally. That was like some of the motivation, and like it's not like the motivation that I'm super excited about, but it's a motivation that existed, and it's some of what have happened, and we can all sort of agree that like however things turned out, when you go over and cross the world to try and stop someone else's famines, you're not a monster, right? You're not a monster when you go over there to try and cure their kids. Like when your ethnic group and race, when your racial group is to a large degree the only thing that has ever fought against childhood type 1 diabetes, and we've created insulin and stuff so that these children can live full lives, and we go over there with the insistence that we save their children's lives from this incurable disease, you know, that may have had some negative consequences or this or that, but like our ancestors weren't bad people for trying, you know?
Yeah. Well said.
Johnny 5K says, would you make anti-white speech illegal if you had power? Well, I mean, I don't know about that. It'd be a complex issue, right?
I think I would make, without thinking about it too much, I believe I would have a series of like I think I would make it illegal to speak in terms of advocating for the undermining of a white nation. Like if Great Britain, let's say I were British and I were living in Great Britain, and Patriotic Alternative won tomorrow, and we wrote up a new constitution, or we amended certain things in the government, and one of the implementations was the UK must maintain a 95% British ethnic majority, and you can never do anything to advocate for the undermining of that or whatever. I mean, I think I would outlaw. I don't know how you would go about that, but I think I would want to outlaw the ability for people to, like, if there was an advocacy group that came about and started to advocate for immigration at that point, or yeah, I think I would outlaw that.
Well, especially in the parliament.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just treachery, right? In the parliament. If you have someone, yeah. But anyway. Dollface says the propaganda analysis lessons in a school would just be hijacked and used as more propaganda, and how you shouldn't trust videos from Odyssey and BitChute, etc. Yeah, I mean, if you let the current educational regime in the West create anti-propaganda stuff, they're just going to define propaganda stuff as like anything that's sympathetic to white people, anything that isn't directly hostile to white people, anything that's heretical to anti-whiteism, another way to put that, right? So if it's heretical to the anti-whites and anti-whiteism, they'll call it propaganda, because propaganda is mostly an emotional term used in the public, right? Like propaganda in like sort of real terms, like what does it actually mean? It means like any bit of media or something designed to convince someone of something, right? So if I were to write up a piece about why you should feed your dogs in a certain way rather than some other way, even if I'm not selling pet food, I just like have some genuine concern out of the well-being of canine companions, that would be a propaganda piece, because it's ultimately designed to convince you of something. But because it's not, like, a lot of times your average person would fail to recognize it as propaganda because they only sort of imagine it to be, I don't know,
a World War II-esque poster.
Yeah,
with,
it's
like,
got to be a World War II
it,
poster produced by the Soviets or the Nazis. Otherwise, it's not really propaganda.
Yeah.
Mr.
Right,
Gladius.
well,
oh, okay, go ahead. Are you leaving?
Well, if Mr. Gladius is going to say something else, I'll stick around for that, but I was going to hop out after that.
He says, maybe we should teach our people again that might makes right. So he says, who cares if they're starving? They're probably just weak and lazy and deserve it. I don't think our people fundamentally resonate with that deep down. Like,
Not only
we
that,
are
but
a
that can be used against
compassionate
us.
we are a compassionate people. We're a moral people. Go out there right now and talk to white people and say, hey, you should vote for X politician because X politician will get your racial group good things. That's just not that interesting to many white people, right? Like, you can do that a bit with other groups. I mean, you have heard black conservatives talk about how Trump offered the Platinum Plan, and there, like, if you go on Black Twitter, there's arguments about who they should vote for because of who will benefit them. But white people's arguments on Twitter is all about, like, how our children and grandchildren are going to judge us. Like, it's all about, like, are you going to be on the right side of history, right? That's the accusation, that you won't be on the right side of history if you vote for this person. The white people don't so much care if the politician is good for us. They care about if the politician is good, period. Moral, period. We're very moral, caring people. And that morality has been hijacked in ways that, like, make us demonize ourselves. But while that's the case, we're still a very good, caring, moral people.
Yeah, and if you make the argument, oh, you know, so and so's low IQ, they're incompetent, and they're gonna starve or whatever, why should you care? I mean, that's sort of like something that, you know, a lot of, like, pull yourself up by the bootstraps sort of libertarian boomers kind of say about, like, certain people within the younger generation, and I think that that can be used to alienate huge swaths of white people from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like it. Like, you know, I've seen this resurgence recently of people talking about, like, don't forgive student loan debt. The students all deserve the debt. You know, they made dumb decisions, yada yada. And there's a certain amount of truth to all of that. But at the same time, what none of those arguments realize is that there were powerful people in authoritative positions who took advantage of young, naive people who didn't know any better and seeded all these really dumb ideas in their brains, like, it doesn't matter what degree you get, just get a degree.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they told them, you'll be able to find a job, you'll be able to do all this, you'll be able to do all of that. And then, you know, they just worked diligently to encourage huge swaths of young people to take out these absurd loans for really worthless degrees. And those people should be held far more accountable than the young people with the student debt. I'm not saying I necessarily think student loan debt should be forgiven. It's just that those kinds of arguments have a tendency to, you know, push the culpability where it might not be warranted. And yeah, I mean, it's in the end, you know, those kinds of arguments aren't really ethnic either. It's like, you know, if you say so and so's low IQ or whatever, like, you know, I just immediately, I can see a lot of libertarian-esque type people just being like, well, there's lots of dumb white people, and we only want the best. You know, we want the best of the best, and it's like, you know, that's another really big point. I don't think ethnic nationalism is ultimately elitist nationalism, and when people say, you know, like, I don't want to live in a society that just wants the best blacks, the best Asians, the best whites, the best of everybody, and screw everybody else. Like, that's, you know, that's going to create a hellscape for everybody, and nobody really wants to deal with the collateral damage of any of that. So I mean, just, yeah, I don't know. I'm babbling again. I should probably just call it and go.
Alrighty, well, thanks for showing up, Krogan. I'll still play for about an hour.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me on again. I'll have to try to keep up with this game a little bit more, but yeah, I'll talk to you later.
All right, peace. Well, now let's take a look at the chat here. Stu says, have you done radio or voice acting in the past? I always thought voice acting would be really cool, although I've never tried, and who knows, I probably wouldn't be very good at it. But I have done some radio broadcasting, but that was a while ago. So Spencer says, I think the right side of history thing has been used against us. Clearly, right? That being said, the point is, Like, that's what our people care about. Our people are very moral people. They want to be not just right, they don't want to just get what's good for them. Our people really do want good things for the world. So who's ever able to make the case that they're the good things, that's who white people will support. Obviously, it's been used against us, but like it also can be used for us. And this is where Pontic comes in. Pontic is saying, are our people really that altruistic? Excusing things like rape, especially rape of your own people, is that really that altruistic? Well, that's the challenges we need to hit them with, right? We need to challenge them. They are really altruistic, good, moral people. Our people care about morality more than most anyone else. But the argument you make against them is not stop being moral or stop being altruistic. It's actually what you're doing isn't. You know, there's a better way. There's a different way. You need to change your views, not against morality, but against the particulars, because what you think is moral isn't moral. Anti-whiteism isn't moral, right? That's one of the arguments we need to make, right? That their anti-whiteism is not a moral good. That, you know, the demonization of white people going around the world in the effort to try and cure disease and end famines, like demonizing white people for that isn't good and is actually immoral. But we can't, if you try and come at it from a perspective of we need to like convince white people to drop morality as this major viewpoint, like that's not going to work. Second Hat says, how hard would it be to create an artificial island and make it an independent nation? Surely a billionaire or even multimillionaire could achieve the project, I think. Well, artificial islands are incredibly expensive. Incredibly expensive. And if you'd have to almost put it in the deep ocean where it would be harder to make, because if you're near anyone's coastline, like, national sovereignty is no joke. You do something that threatens national sovereignty in any sort of way, and exclusive economic zones and waterways and rights to access waterways. Like, if you put yourself near someone else's coastline, you get a certain buffer zone if you're a country of like exclusive economic zone, and also like zone by which you can put in environmental regulations. And if some new upstart country is like, oh, we're going to put ourselves off of your coast, and like all of a sudden they're in control of a lot of the rules and laws about like economics and environmental regulations, no, they're not tolerating that. Like, you get nuked pretty quick. And you might be able to look at something like Sealand. Isn't this called Sealand? Sealand. Let me type that in. Yeah, the Principality of Sealand. So this is it's a platform off the coast of world's smallest nation. Sealand grapples with princess's death. So this is a platform off the coast of the UK that sort of declared itself its own country, and it's like a guy or something. It's like his family. And you can say, well, the UK is letting this happen, but this is like a guy. And he's not like a serious threat towards any sort of real autonomy. If you put a very large platform out somewhere and started to accumulate thousands of people, and then like they were going to like have some sort of claim to the waters around them, any country in your vicinity would see it as a potential threat to all the good things they have going on. And there's like a moralistic part of this. Like, if you tried to make a little white country, that's what you're suggesting, make a little white country out in the ocean, I think it might be worth trying, but I think there could be quite an international campaign by the anti-whites against you. And all of a sudden, you might find that your ocean, or your island in the middle of the ocean, got Waco'd. I'm just saying. It's really unfortunate. Like, the anti-whites are vicious. They will kill white people. Like, if And it's like, they'll chase us down. Like, if our goal is to, like, leave and try and, like, live in peace amongst ourselves, like, they don't like that. They don't like that. Pontic, have a good night. Mr. Gladius says, have whites always been altruistic? We conquered, and surely it wasn't because we wanted to civilize the barbarians. Well, some of it was, yeah. But, I mean, like, things... I mean, we've always been altruistic, but there's been times of sort of, like, salience of in-group and out-group. In-group and out-group, like, have started to really come into focus. And we feel a lot of altruism towards the in-group, and at the moment, whites, like, basically view it, everyone is within the in-group, right? Like, you know, the conservatives, when they see a black guy in a, like an American flag t-shirt, I mean, he's in the in-group. I mean, he waves our flag. Mr. Gladius says, here in Italy, they tried to create another country called the Republic of Roses, where they turned an oil station into a nation. They even wanted to use the Esperanto language. Didn't last long. You know, I don't think it was. Yeah. Knat says, not gonna lie, but we must be quite desperate to build an ocean country like that. Yeah, for sure. Victorian says, a couple years ago, a gang of anti-white non-whites beat his little brother within an inch of his life outside a bar. Does every white person have to experience that to change their mind? That is the question, right? Obviously, on some level, that's what we're seeing, right? The least racial, you know, sometimes people will tell you that thing, like, they'll say, like, oh, well, what we need is people to just interact. If people interact with each other, you know, all of the racial hatred, the animosity, all these feelings will go away. And that's obviously not the case. I mean, just look at the United States. People who have, like, whites who are thought of, like, stereotypically, what whites are the most negative towards blacks? It's southern whites, right? It's not northern whites. If you think of, like, organizations like the Black Panthers, that's a black organization, or the KKK, like, where did those start? Well, the KKK started down in the South. It's not like the KKK's ever had a big presence in Maine, because it's all white in Maine. No one's motivated to start something like that up in Maine, because Maine's been all white. It's just a bunch of white people hanging out. When it's a state full of white people, like parts of Washington State, Oregon, Maine, you know, you find pictures, there's diversity posters all over the wall. Everyone's like, oh yeah, you know, we're all the same inside. But you go down south, things aren't quite so friendly because people have actually interacted with each other, and they don't buy that nonsense anymore, right? Similarly, so Black Panthers, did that start down in, like, the southern Mississippi River Valley, the blackest places in the United States? No, it started in Detroit. And you might think of Detroit as a very black place now, but it wasn't back then. You know, back then it was a very white place. Isn't it interesting that when blacks started to be around lots of other whites, that's when they started the Black Panthers? You know, they didn't do it when they were all amongst themselves, right? Like, the notion of, like, oh, well, everyone will get along, or all this racial stuff will go away once we've interacted a lot. I mean, that is not only demonstrably false, it's, like, literally the opposite that is true. The more we interact, the more problems we have. Oh, Dollface. People in England versus people in Scotland. Right, a lot of Scottish people are, like, shocked at how racist or whatever, you know, these English people are, and they're like, why aren't they celebrating diversity so thoroughly like we do? Well, it's like, well, they've lived in more of it than you, right? People don't like diversity once they've lived in it. The biggest advocates of diversity are the people who don't live in it. And if we think of the United States, like, okay, I'm not big on the Republicans or the Democrats, but like the Democrats tend to push the diversity line a little bit harder than the Republicans. And I mean, everyone points out the fact that like a lot of these rich Democrats, these limousine liberals, I mean, they have very nice houses in very white areas. I mean, it's like, yeah, they have their Hispanic limousine driver, but, you know, they avoid the consequences of diversity whenever possible.
Where is that damn tin?
Second Hat says, suppose the island nation gets up and started. How would the anti-whites sell a conquest of a peaceful island nation to their populace? Well, I mean, the anti-whites have control of the media. I mean, they can literally just make stuff up if they like. They could say like, "Hey, this is a place." You know, they'll say this is a place where women and children get raped, right? Because that's something white people deeply care about. Like, you know, the media will go from "What's a woman really?" to "Women are being raped." You know, out on this little island nation, and we need to conquer it. I mean, there's a million ways they could do that.
Stays on. Maybe we're not gonna die after all.
Johnny 5K, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Alright, just gotta fill up this dozer. Whoa. Get out of here, youngling. I don't know if I'm gonna go for these blue caps. How much nitro do I have? I have enough for a resupply. I might just go straight to the end of this. Not bother with anything else. Too bad we didn't... I did a couple missions with Krogan, and I didn't see any of the new hacking missions. I wanted to try and get him on that. Nero says, quote, "Island nation Nazi, we bomb." Right. Well, that's... yeah. I mean, it could be that simple. Right? White people being together. That's seen as an evil thing. Dollface says the same way they sanctioned against South Africa. Yeah. Mr. Gladius says hacking underground. Yeah. Weren't you here when we were doing that? Give me that nitro. Or Germany or Rhodesia, says Nero. Yeah. Also, one of the things I want to talk about today is food and some of my tweets.
Gotta get it plugged back in.
Just because I feel like there's a lot of clarity I think we could bring to this sort of thinking about these sorts of things. But I'll do that at the next little thing. The next stop, I want to bring up a tweet or two. Second Hat says the difference is this imaginary country in South Africa would be that there wouldn't be non-white part of the population, so they couldn't that they championed with the sanctions. Just a bunch of people who all came together of free will. Yeah, but not good people, bad people. I mean, that's the point they'd be making. I mean, these are white people who wanted to be with other white people, so they're awful, they're evil, right? Like, I'm not saying, if there's a billionaire out there who's listening and has been thinking about making an island, I'm not saying it's the worst idea, but I don't think it's the cost-effective idea for, like, long-term future for our people and fighting against anti-whiteism, right? I'll say that. My thought is if you wanted to do something like that, and you would have to have massive media campaigns, like social media campaigns. Like, when your island gets started, you need to have social media influencers as a part of your project or come to your island, and they need to be able to show people the truth about your island, right? They need to be able to show people that, like, hey, these people aren't hurting anybody. They're just gonna be here doing their own thing. It's not a big deal. Nothing's happening. You shouldn't hate them. And like that has to be part of the project, because at some point they're gonna try and lie about you in the mainstream media to potentially push for war against you, right? And conquering you. So if you never started out by counter-signaling that inevitable demonization of your people, then the demonization will be successful, right? You have to preempt the demonization that's going to take place. And you know what? Even if you try, it might still not be enough, right? You might not be able to fully counter-signal all the demonization that comes enough to actually save you.
Drill dozer's out of fuel again. Time to harvest some oil seal, folks.
Platform!
Marvelous says, speaking of Detroit, look up the Black Legion. They were an offshoot of the clan that wore Halloween pirate hats with skulls and crossbones on them. Mr. Gladius says, at this point, they don't even need our consensus. They could bomb Orania, and we wouldn't even know about it. Right. This is why I'm saying, like, if you wanted to do another mini Orania, like, you would want, as much as possible, the world to have seen you present your own community in your own way before they finally get to see CNN or whatever do it. Because, like, what would it take right now? Like, most people haven't heard of Orania. So what do? They...
Fire!
Like, YouTube could scrub everything good about Orania right now, and CNN and MSNBC and Fox and ABC and NBC could start demonizing Orania, and there'd be... Your average person would have no exposure to it outside of that, and the regime could probably get some massive military violent action put in place against them. Like, they could go start killing those people because they're white and because they want to be together. They would do it. Anti-whites do this sort of nasty stuff.
The drill dozer is en route to the Heartstone. Expect heavy resistance.
I need to deposit in the mule.
Mr. Gladius says, this confirms what I was saying. Might makes right. The weak are crushed by the strong. Yeah, I mean, on some level, that's just how it is. Like, it literally can't be some other way. You know, the people with the power to do the things can do them and don't have to listen to the people who can't fight back. What the heck happened there? Some sort of spitballer. What's that? Oh, Bulu cap. Tiny little cave. We came in, and then we're already leaving. And we're about to get to the last one here. When we get to the last one, I want to talk about some of these tweets that I've gone on the last couple days. Interesting. We can get in here, right here. Whoa! Look at that. Sort of going along the wall here. Johnny 5K says, I doubt fleeing our country solves anything else than hastens their invasion. There is that. I mean, ultimately, like, if you were able to make your own sort of island thing, like, even if, like, you were able to just, like, if you can't turn it into a massive sort of, like,
You want something done
rallying cry
do it yourself.
for a culture war phenomena, it's not going to be like a net positive for our people, likely. Why is that glowing? Okay, let's take a look at this tweet I did here recently. You see this? If you follow me on Twitter, you've seen this. You know, I'll walk down the street and I'll see an obese family, right? Obese dad, obese mom, obese kids. They're walking their obese dog. And I'm thinking to myself that these people have to some ways be genetically nearly identical to their ancestors of 200 years ago or 300 years ago. And they wouldn't have looked like this 200 years ago, right? So I'm inclined to believe that our entire modern system of food and lifestyle is in some way anti-human, right? Like, if the human animal isn't different, but now we're suffering these severe conditions, the environment is in some way, like, to blame for what's happening. Does that make sense? And I got into a little bit of an argument with this woman, right? She's saying, like, hey, this is self-inflicted. And I said, like, well, in a broad sense, this is self-inflicted, right? You know, humans created these systems, but, you know, like, these people, like this obese family, didn't have any agency when it comes to the way things turned out with our food systems and health systems and all that. Like, I talked about hyper-palatable foods being created now. Bliss point engineering. If you don't know Bliss point engineering... Also, I don't know why this game isn't pausing when I'm pressing escape. That used to be the case. Because I'm solo. It's just me and Bosco here. It should definitely pause, but it's not pausing anymore. But, like, Bliss point engineering. If you take a food and add sugar to it, people will like it more. And then you add more sugar to it, and people will like it more. And then you add more sugar to it, and people will like it even more. And then you add more sugar to it, and people will like it a little less. Right? So, let me see if I can bring up paint here. Where's my paint? Here it is. Properties. And grab this and stick it here. So, you basically have something like this. Right? Where this is how much you enjoy a food. And this is how much sugar's in it. Right? So you keep adding more and more sugar and you enjoy it more and more. And then you plateau, and like right here, where it's the absolute best, where like the most people really like it the most, when the most people will crave it the most, when they'll become addicted to it the most, when they will pay the most money for it, right? This is called the bliss point, right? And then if you keep adding sugar, people like it less. So bliss point engineering wasn't coined until the 90s. But so I'm saying, like, hey, listen, this might be sort of self-inflicted on our societies, like we did it to ourselves in a way, but like these people didn't ask to be born into a world where all their food was bliss point engineered to make it like hyper palatable and addictive as possible. And she says, I don't believe you. If it wasn't, or I would believe you if it wasn't for the fact that in the 60s and 70s, me, had the worst post-war garbage food ever. Nobody was fat. Being fat was shameful. People don't care what they look like anymore. They are told it's unimportant, and to hell with them. And I'll tell you that 1960s and 1970s food is somewhat, like, there's bad food in it, right? Like, in the 70s, they had cake and cookies, right? You could overeat cake and cookies and get fat. Like, that's true, right? But, like, what I'm talking about in terms of hyper-palatable food and bliss point engineering largely didn't exist in the 60s and 70s like she's talking about. This person asked, did the food pyramid exist in the 60s? No, it didn't. The FDA didn't really get into the food recommendations like we think about it until the 1970s. And it wasn't until the 1990s that the food pyramid came into existence as we know it. Oh, great. What? Ah, God, I hate this app sometimes. Let's copy. No. I hate this website. All right. Let me do this. Okay. So here's what I'm saying to her. I said 1960 food was bad, but it was new, right, to a large degree. Like, a lot of the nasty food... Let's see here. Like, a lot of these snack cakes and whatever... Because when did this come out? I mean, Twinkies came out in the 1930s, I guess. But, a lot of the nasty, like, post-war food that she's thinking of... people hadn't necessarily grown up with it, right? Like, if you were 40, you grew up in the 1920s, right? And Twinkies hadn't been invented yet, you know? You don't remember when you were 6 years old and you snacking on Twinkies because those didn't exist yet, right? And my point is, like, what she's saying, this idea that, like, to hell with these people who are now obese, like, I'm not big on that. You know, the majority of people in places like the UK and the US are overweight or obese, and I don't say to hell with them, right? Like, I don't hate these people. I hate the companies that have created this situation, right? Now, she says, we had bad food for decades, and of course, again, they had cake and cookies. Not fridges crammed with food to eat all day and night, right? She says what's more important is that we were allowed to say if someone was fat. Now the only concern is not to hurt a fat person's feelings. Big mistake. It's a green light to eat to death. Now, like, and again, this game should be paused, but, and I don't know why. But what I want to make... Oh my gosh. Okay.
We need to fix it.
I have a bulk detonator now. This is annoying. So, she points out an important reality. Like, this is not a dumb lady or whatever. Like, I'm disagreeing with her, or I have some things that I think I wish she would see from my perspective or whatever. But, like, clearly not a dumb lady. She has an important point to make about, like, there are people now, more so than in the past, who would say something like, hey, listen, you know, I'm me, I get to be as fat as I want, I get to eat whatever I want, you know, all this, like, if I want to go buy a cake at 3 in the morning and then eat a whole cake, I should be able to do that, you know? Like, you have some people saying that, right? And she's disgusted by that, right? She is disgusted by that. But what I am saying is that some of those people existed back then, but the systems didn't just enable that, right? Like, nowadays, there are lots of 24-hour grocery stores, when back in the 60s there wasn't. And there are grocery stores that can just give you whole cakes, and you can eat them. You can just go to the store, get a cake, and eat it. A whole cake for yourself. And that's present today when it wouldn't have been present in the 70s. The 2 a.m. cake run simply couldn't have happened. And I'm saying some of those people did exist back then. It's just, you know, the systems didn't, right? And obviously now we've had marketing campaigns like Taco Bell and their 4th meal campaign. The idea was their 4th meal campaign was like, hey, it's 1 in the morning. You have nothing to do anyway. Why not eat, right? You're awake, so why not eat? And while that sort of mentality is really bad, and we can tell people that they shouldn't have that mentality is partly there because of the marketing, because of the hyper-palatable foods, because of all the systems that worked to give them that mentality, right? Like, this mentality did not come about wholly organically.
I'm having the best time in my life right now.
95K, how much sugar is the bliss point per 100 grams? Well, it depends on the food. And are you just talking about sugar or carbohydrates? We're just talking about sugar, right? I mean, if you just think of, you can try it if you have it at your house, honey and soy sauce. Mix those two together.
Not ready. Flares recharged.
And then dip something in it. It tastes delicious. It's insanely delicious. That being said, it's half soy sauce, which would normally be very salty. Like a sauce, a dipping sauce that is half soy sauce that actually clumps up onto your food would be way too salty to eat normally. And something that is half honey that clumps up onto your food would also normally be too sweet. It'd be like sickly, annoyingly sweet for chicken, right? Breaded chicken. But if you mix half soy sauce and half honey, you would think like, okay, this should be too obnoxiously salty and too obnoxiously sweet at the same time. In actuality, it just tastes delicious to human taste buds, right? So the bliss point is different for each food. And, I talked about this here, Dr. Pepper Cherry Vanilla. That was released in 2004. And the food scientist who worked on it, I forget his name, he did more than 3,000 tasting trials for Dr. Pepper Cherry Vanilla. They had something like 64 different formulas they created. It was like 3,900 tasting trials. They wrote a report that was like 130 pages long about the scientific findings they came up with. And the scientific findings in this case was about like trying to make food that was the most palatable to people. And they were able to break it down in terms of like, well, different racial groups, different demographics, young people, old people, men, women, right? They were able to figure out like, okay, these are the different formulas that perform the best in this, so that way they could hand off that 100-page document to the investors and the owners so that they could assign that to the correct marketing schemes to reach out to the people who it was designed to be hyper palatable for and to have a successful product, right? Like, there's nothing in the 1960s or the 1970s that's quite like that, right? Yes, there was cakes and cookies. Yes, you could eat yourself into obesity off of high sugary drinks, go to the malt shop every day and eat bad food. But no one did what I'm talking about. Victorian says, you're both right. Well, and I do think we're both right. Like, she's making some reasonable points, but I would like to suggest to her that the attitudes that she's seen are in part because of the systems, right? The systems enabled that. If these people that she's talking about that are like, I can go buy a cake and eat the whole thing and I'd be fat as I want and you shouldn't be fat phobic, like, those people couldn't do that if our systems were different. They simply couldn't. Like, I'm suggesting that the people who you see doing that around you, saying like, I'd be as fat as I want, I'm gonna eat 500 pounds of cake in a weekend, like, Some of the European peasants would have done that, but they simply couldn't, right? They simply couldn't have done that. It's not that they wouldn't have, it's that they couldn't. So maybe our system, rather than her saying, well, they shouldn't, I'm saying maybe they should be in a system where they can't. Because that's how it used to be. I'm saying return to a situation where they can't. Because it's in the past where people were healthier, they didn't just choose to not do that. They couldn't do it. There was no Taco Bell fourth meal at 1 in the morning. All right. Second Hat says, it takes effort to not stuff your face with what evolution has installed in them to gorge themselves on, right? Second Hat says, I've lost nearly 10 kilograms this year, so about 23 pounds. But when I stand in the supermarket, I have to willfully say no to sweets and other items that would make me fat. Oh, exactly. I mean, like, historically, a sugary food, like, let's say you're Northern European, I'm Northern European, like, there would be that time when, like, cloudberries or lingonberries would be in season, and you would gorge yourself on it. You would gorge yourself on it. And then for the other, like, 51 weeks of the year, they'd be gone. So that was the point. Like, we have these gorging tendencies within humans for, like, hyper sugary foods. That's just normal. That's how it's supposed to work on some level. But now we've created a very toxic environment where, like, even the meat is covered with sugar. And everything's covered with sugar. Oh, and by the way, you can eat it at any time of the year. You can get tropical fruits delivered to your house whenever you want. You want a pineapple in January? Here's your pineapple in January, right? KNAT says, do you think banting diets, mostly meat, succeed because underlying people on that diet avoid bliss point engineered food? Yeah, for some, that's part of it. And I've talked about this a little bit before, like keto. When keto was new, a lot of people had success on keto because keto sort of required that you just eat whole foods. Like, you just had to go to the store and get eggs and avocado and salad stuff and avoid the croutons, right? You just went and you ate whole foods. But I think in the future, like now and over the coming months, we're going to see a lot more people struggle when they try keto, because what they're going to do is go to the store and buy these keto bars. They're going to buy engineered keto products. They're going to be buying stuff, they're going to be buying this crap, right? And they're going to be thinking it's the same as when people tried keto years ago and found all that success, right? I mean, I think I have my opinions on dieting and food, but I think almost all reasonable people agree, no matter what you think of this or that, like, the engineered processed food is easily one of the worst things. And if you cut that out, no matter how much meat you're eating or whatever, like, that'll be an improvement. Mr. Gladius says, the fact that you can talk for hours about this particular subject shows how low Americans have fallen. But we Europeans aren't that far behind, considering how every big city is a den of degeneracy. Well, exactly. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, like, Europe is just behind America in terms of all the processed food, all of the crap, all of the very overweight people. Like, 20% of American children are obese, or overweight. All right, no, I think it's obese. Point is, it's like 20% of American children are obese. I'm almost positive. I'd have to look it up. I posted something about that on Twitter recently. But like, if you expand the number to just be overweight, I think it's like half or more, right? Life After Death says, you know where milk comes from? Cow's milk? Comes from cows. Johnny 5K says, don't go shopping when hungry. Oh, yeah. If you go shopping with hungry, that's a great way to buy a lot of stuff. Victorian says, there needs to be a tax on people who are overweight. I mean, it's not the worst idea, but I don't think it's the solution either. Right? I think the solution is to get this Like, all these processed food manufacturers who are making buku bucks on giving us trash food, like, they need to stop. Like, and the thing is, like, if I was, like, gonna be president of the United States, and, like, some CEO of Kraft might be worried, and it's like, listen, they're still major food manufacturers. They could still be major food manufacturers. I'm fine with that. They just can't keep making this crap food, right? Second Hat says, anyone know of Nick Avocado? Yeah, Nick Avocado. I know him. Yeah. He ate himself into a balloon. Yeah, he's a weird guy. Johnny 5K says, I heard keto is good to lose weight, sudden, but it's only water and goes away after about 10 kilograms. Well, I mean, you will lose water weight, especially at the beginning on keto. That being said, unless you're very large, you probably don't have 10 kilograms of water weight to lose. Plenty of people have lost tons of weight on keto. It is a very good way to go. It's especially if you're going to go whole foods based, right? And historically, like years past, like that's what it meant. Like if you wanted to eat keto, you basically had to avoid everything processed in the store, right? But now you're going to see a lot of these like various semi-digestible sweeteners and artificial sweeteners in these keto products, these products labeled as keto, and you're going to see people trying keto and eating these bars and these keto cookies and these keto pancakes, and they're not just eating like how people used to eat when keto first started to hit the mainstream, right? When keto first started to hit the mainstream, it was just like, well, you know, have a big salad, have some meat, have an avocado, and have your eggs in the morning, you know? And it's like, that really works. Mr. says, Nikocado got fat after he stopped being vegan. Well, he got fat once he started doing mukbangs. I mean, a lot of his mukbangs are keto, right? Are vegan, right? Like, he'll eat 7,000 calories of noodles. I mean, that's a vegan meal. It's just 7,000 calories of noodles. I mean, but there's old videos of Nikocado just eating like 2 avocados, which is a very sort of keto common meal, like just a couple of avocados. Johnny 5K says potato chips are vegan, right? A lot of cookies are vegan. A lot, you know. I remember there was these wafer cookies that I bought that, like, I wouldn't buy them very much because they are just terrible for you, and I probably don't need any more wafer cookies in my life, right? Like, I've probably had enough wafer cookies for my lifetime. I don't need any more. And I remember on the package, they said vegan, right? Like, oh, they're vegan cookies. Oh, they're good for me or something. French fries are vegan, says Nero. Exactly. I mean, like, there are plenty of fat vegans. I mean... Uh-oh. Goo bomber. Second Hat says fasting for 24 hours also works. Just drink water and perhaps a glass of milk. The next day, eat healthy in moderation, an egg, an orange, some avocados or nuts. That's what I'm doing, and it works. Yeah, I mean, fasting is something we should all be considering, you know? Especially if you're overweight. David says the live stream. Yeah, I am live streaming. I got the, let me take a look here. Do I have it? That's when I stream. I mean, there's a lot of things that are technically vegan. I think that's what we're getting at.
The drill dozer just has to drill a little further, and we're done.
These bugs don't stand a chance against us.
Let me just knock this down.
Anyone guarding the drill dozer?
I feel like for people looking to lose weight, the work of Dr. Jason Fung, he's a Chinese guy in Canada. He's pretty good. He does a lot of work with fasting. I mean, fasting is just a very efficient way to lose weight. It's quite tolerable when you get used to it, and I think it has a positive psychological effect, right? Like, there's a lot of people with a lot of anxiety around food. Like, they feel like they have to eat all the time, and their perception of how much they should eat is warped, and it's like they feel like they have to overeat all the time. And if you've ever go through a period of a few days without eating, it can sort of shape your perspective on, like, hey, you know, like, I don't know, sort of calms you down, like, rather than anxiety about food, like, oh no, what am I gonna eat for lunch? It's almost dinner time, what do? I better get all this food and eat it, and eat it, and eat it. It's like, if you've gone a week without eating, you're probably not gonna think like that anymore.
Keep Doretta safe.
Are you going to bed, Mr. Gladius? Have a good night. I don't have to defend this. It's already over. Trying to lose weight by eating Trix yogurt, Honey Nut Cheerios, and apple slices. That would be not... That would be rough. That would be a hard way to lose weight.
Press the button on the mule, and we will send in the drop pod.
Second Hat says, I eat bacon and want to find some duck. Love duck. Oh yeah, duck's great. People who don't like duck, there's something wrong with them.
I called for more.
David says he rows 1.5 miles 4 days a week. I do running, but my PCL and MCL are torn. Oof. David says he lost about 50 kilograms rowing on a rowing machines. Rode on it until the machine broke. Well, that's cool. We know who's tougher then, between you and the rowing machines. That's an accomplishment. That's something you get to brag about. Johnny 5K says, does fasting lose your muscle mass? I'd say that most people, when they lose weight, they're losing muscle mass. The best way to prevent muscle mass, or it's muscle mass retention, is best when you're engaging in some sort of use of those muscles during your weight loss, right? So, like, if you're not training when you're losing weight, you'll always lose muscle mass. You know, fasting, I don't think is particularly bad. I mean, part of the reason you end up losing muscle mass is problems with insulin, and fasting does very well at leveling out insulin, keeping it at sort of like stable fasting insulin levels. Fasting insulin levels is what they call it. When you're like, even like when you go to bed, you're at fasting insulin level. But obviously, you got to engage in some amount of regular exercise if you want to maintain muscle mass during any sort of weight loss, right? But I wouldn't expect it to be especially bad during fasting. I know if you look at the work of Dr. Jason Fung, he's talked about some of the effects in regards to muscle loss, and there's some amount of protection of muscle loss during fasting. But you would still expect to lose some, right? Unless you're continuing your exercise.
Hasn't gone unnoticed. Management are seriously considering you for promotion, but you'll have to complete one final assignment first. Prove yourself, and a promotion awaits you.
Eric says the only thing is to make sure not to overeat after fasting. I had a bulimic girlfriend who did this. Yeah, definitely. Well, and the longer you fast, the harder that is. Like, if you're doing every other day fasting, right? Like, eat Monday, fast Tuesday, eat Wednesday, fast Thursday, right? Every other day. Like, it's not that big a deal, but the longer your fasts are, the easier it is to overeat. Like, if you have a week-long fast or something, then it's easier to overeat. Second Hat says, when I exercise, I prefer not to use machines, like running in nature. Wind and sun is a boost. When you do not... something you do not get directly on a machine. You also get to see the nearby sights, just my 2 cents. I mean, I think a lot of people might agree with that on some level. And I mean, like, there's machines, and then there's also free weights, right? So, like, you could not be on a machine, but also not outside. Use free weights, barbells, dumbbells, kettlebell, etc. Victorian says, I don't like to admit it, but I used to be very overweight, and I can tell you eating fewer calories is the answer. Listen to Coach Greg. His voice is annoying, but he tells you the truth. Nero says, Ceylon cinnamon is also good for insulin sensitivity. Sauerkraut is a good food as well, helps digestion. That being said, at the end of the day, insulin sensitivity, what are the best things you can do for insulin sensitivity? Not eat a lot of sugar and get regular exercise. Regular exercise, I mean, athletes are very insulin sensitive. Yeah, physical exercise improves insulin sensitivity significantly, right? And as long as we're talking about food, I did want to hit up this other tweet that I did a while ago. And I had some people push back on me because they didn't quite understand what I was saying. I said, I don't want entire sections of my grocery store dedicated to ethnic outsiders. I don't want ethnic outsiders given preferential treatment for applying for jobs in college when they're competing against my own family members. I want a Christmas market without barricades. Right? This is what I said. And a lot of people, or some people, most of those comments are deleted, I believe, because a lot of those, you know, it's Twitter. They probably got banned, all right? Some of these people thought I was suggesting that, like, you shouldn't have foreign food in your grocery store, right? They thought I was saying, like, oh my gosh, tortillas and refried beans, get this out of here, or, you know, something like that. But that's not what I'm saying, right? When I say I don't want entire sections of my grocery store dedicated to ethnic outsiders, I'm talking about there is shelf space in grocery stores. Like, go to Oslo, Norway, right? If you go there years ago, before there's any, like, Somalis there, every shelf in the store is full of products because the grocer is supplying those products to Norwegian people. See what I'm saying? But now there's sections of the grocery store, actual physical shelves, that contain food that the Norwegians might not want, but the Somalians do. So those shelves are now for the Somalis. And those shelves might have Chinese food on them or something. I don't know, anything. Like, if you know, up in Scandinavia, especially Norway, like, they do a taco night nearly every week. Like, most families in Norway have a taco night. I don't think it's Taco Tuesday. I think they do something more like a Taco Friday.
Friday night is Taco Tuesday.
Just like that. Just like Xavier Renegade Angel. And that's fine. Like, I don't have a problem with the idea of Norwegian being like, oh, tacos, haha, I love these. I'll have these. I hope we can buy some of these at our grocery store. Like, that's fine with me. But when I made this tweet, you know, I said, if you can't maintain your grocery store, how are you going to maintain a society? The reality is, grocery stores are one of the quickest things to change, to adopt to new arrivals. Right? So, if, you know, let's say years ago, let's say you're in Norway, years ago, 100% of the shelves were dedicated to whatever would please the palates and the nutritional sensibilities of Norwegians. And now they've lost, let's say, 20% of the shelves. 20% of the shelves aren't for what the Norwegians want. They're what some other group wants. What some foreign ethne who has moved in, what they want. Well, you're going to lose your society long term. Because, so, those people who move in, who want different foods, will also have their own sorts of opinions on housing and laws and how your schools are run and what your children get taught. And they will influence all those things, but not before they influence the grocery store shelves, because grocery store shelves are about turnover, right? Grocery store shelves turn over their products days, weeks, or sometimes months. So grocers will be the first to adjust for the new population. But it will only be so long before housing is developed in a different way to please this new group instead of the prior group. It's only so long before the school curriculum needs to be adjusted. So when I made that tweet, you know, some people are saying like, well, Embargo is just some like really low level goofy person who wants you know, who wants foreign foods to be kept out of the grocery store. No, it's that I want your shelves in your stores to be for your people. That's what it's about. Let's see. Second Hat says, could you comment on all the drugs Americans are conditioned to take? Well, I mean, we've had a number of lawsuits and stuff now related to opioids and synthetic opioids. A lot of doctors seem to have gotten a lot of kickbacks for prescribing opioids. There's a lot of pain clinics you can go to. And even with a fairly flimsy story, you can just sort of say you're in lots of pain and they'll prescribe you very addictive medications. It's very frustrating and sad to see. I would like to see a healthcare systems where doctors are very cognizant of the fact that medications can be helpful, but only in the correct amounts, nothing more. And a good doctor, if you're going to a good doctor, your doctor should generally be making sure that you're getting off medications when it's appropriate to take you off, and is only having you take the amounts that it's appropriate to have you take. But I can only say so much. You know, I'm not your doctor, and I don't want to get banned by YouTube. Second Hat says, women from teenagehood are supposed to take the pill to make their body think they're pregnant. Yeah, so, like, you have hormonal birth control, which has had a remarkably profoundly bad effect on women. I'd check Aiden Paladin. She's got a good video on hormonal birth control. I mean, it's sad. Like, hormonal birth control actually changes sexual preferences in women. So, like, there are women who have met men, thought those men were attractive and nice and wanted to be around them. They got off, they got married, they got off their hormonal birth control, and they started to be disgusted by the men they married, because they were attracted to those men while they were being hormonally manipulated. And that's just devastating. Could you imagine if you had gotten married to a woman and she wanted to have your baby, and so she got off hormonal birth control, and she found you disgusting once she was off birth control? I mean, that's terrible. Very terrible. Absolutely terrible. One of the worst things that's happening in our society. It is devastating. Like, people have no idea the long-term genetic effects that will take place due to generations of women being on hormonal birth control. And most, like, when I was a kid, like, and I grew up in a lot of the sexually degenerate stuff too, I was told that hormonal birth control and the pill was all just hunky-dory because now we could all be sexually liberated and have lots of meaningless sex with strangers, and that's what we should all want. And I had no idea that this sort of thing was happening. David says, since diversity swept through, we just ended up with dozens of grocery stores dedicated to foreign outsiders, mainly halal meat. Yeah, and in my last stream, or one of my last streams, we looked a little bit at halal and kosher slaughter. Some of it is very brutal. Victorian says, I fasted for 14 days once. I looked horrible and gained the weight back quickly. Oh, really? The longest I've gone is 10 days. I did a 10-day fast. Lost about 10 pounds. I mean, an adult man generally loses a pound a day on fasting. Like pound a day net, long term. Like you'll lose some water if you went from like heavy eating to fasting. You'll also lose a lot of water. So you like your first couple days, you'll lose a lot more than a pound. But like a pound of fat a day, roughly, from fasting. I fasted 10 days, and then I stopped fasting because I was meeting my mother for Mother's Day, and we were going to Vegas, and we wanted to eat at the Vegas buffets. So I lost a few pounds before I went to Vegas, and then me and my mother, when we were in Vegas, we still lost weight in Vegas because we were going to one Vegas buffet a day, and that's basically all we were eating. So we would go in at like 11 and hang out there for like 2 hours in the buffet. But then that would be the only thing we'd really eat that day. So, my 10-day fast was successful in terms of weight loss, and I lost weight after that as well, and kept it off. I mean, personally, I think fasting is a very powerful tool. I think it's not only physically powerful in terms of what it can achieve in terms of weight loss, but also psychologically. I mean, like, if you're in a position where you've been eating lots of sugary foods, and, like, you're getting the shakes, and you're getting anxious and like shaky over like when's lunch. I mean, it's a real big psychological reset once you know what it feels like to just not eat for a whole week at a time or more. And now I don't think to myself, when's lunch, because I know what it's like to not eat for days. I'm not like freaked out about when lunch is coming. Overall, I think we probably wouldn't have to do a lot of this stuff if our systems, these food systems, just didn't suck. I mean, we're given all this terribly hyper-palatable food, these fourth meal campaigns designed to get you to just eat their products all days of the week, all hours of the day. Second Hat says, here in Denmark, it is a major mark of contention when Muslims demand schools not to serve pig meat since we're a major nation of pig eaters. Yeah, that's annoying. David says he had a girlfriend when he was 18 and she had been on birth control since 15. Now she has 2 kids, 2 different fathers, and a new boyfriend every other month. Dodge a bullet breaking up with her. That's sad. That's a bummer. Second Hat says, anyone got a good side thing to get money? I bought some stock, and I pick up bottles for the deposit. Although it's a small amount. Usually only for poor children and homeless. Still got quite a bit saved up via the method. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things you could do for money in your part-time. I mean, you could always get a part-time job. Or start more of a small business. But that's really up to, like, what sort of things you're interested in and your local economy, right? I've talked about it before. Things you can do with extra money. Like I had a whole stream where I talked about all the things you can do with various amounts of excess money right now, like investment purposes and whatnot. I feel like this is a good time. I know you're in Europe. I'm not sure exactly what it's like right there right now, but I know here in the United States, I mentioned, like, if you had a little bit more money, but not millions or anything, this is, I feel like, a pretty good time to invest in durable business goods, particularly durable business goods you might use to make money. So think something like metal lathe, wood lathe, drill press, any sort of woodworking and metalworking equipment, loom, textile manufacturing equipment, even screen printing and stuff for shirts, right? Some stuff like that you can engage in some amount of production value with. I feel like this is a good time to buy certain durable goods like that. Even a plow, right? Like a steel plow for a truck. Depending on where you live, obviously. Maybe not if you're in Florida. Alright, well. Life After Death says, I'm weak and shaky when I'm hungry. Well, exactly. And I don't know what your health situation is like, but a lot of us who have been weak and shaky when we're hungry, we're on these sort of cycles of eating lots of sugary foods somewhat frequently all the time, and some of us engage in things like keto and carnivore and fasting, and we find that we're no longer like that. Right? That we can sort of break that. But, you know, like, listen, you know, you're gonna have to talk to your doctor or whatever, I guess. Just so YouTube doesn't ban me. Alright. Second Hat says, any business in particular you'd recommend, Embargo? I mean, that's pretty, again, it depends, like, you have to be interested in it. And it has to be something that makes sense for your location. And I don't know a lot about your location and what's going on there. Or what you're interested in. But why don't you look some stuff up on some of those websites like Alibaba and look at different pieces of manufacturing equipment you might be able to buy, or look at different pieces of sort of like rental vending equipment you might be able to buy. Those are things that you could acquire and use, contribute to the local economy, and maybe get some wealth from. So think, like, go on Alibaba, type in like different types of manufacturing equipment, like screen printing and whatever, and also look into things like vending machines, rental locker machines. Those are things you could potentially purchase and place somewhere with a power connection and regularly stop by, service of them, pick up money. Victorian says Mormons fast once a month. Yeah, they're supposed to fast one Sunday a month, generally, I believe. And then give that money away. Whatever money that they would, you know, have spent on the food that day. Okay, well, I think that's about it for me. I gotta get going. Been streaming for a while. Glad American Krogan was able to show up a little bit today. That was fun. And that's about it. Peace out, everybody.
Welcome to Costco. I love you. Welcome to Costco. I love you. Welcome to Costco. I love you. Welcome here.